Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Briarpatch. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, let's start off with that opening. That whole situation with Jean finding the cat dead and everything, which I was like, oh, that was so gnarly. They actually showed the cat. I was like, oh, you poor little bastard. But the fact of the matter is him trying to hide it from his wife. And it's just like, he's like, all right, what am I going to do? And then like he thinks about stuffing in the mailbox and he starts doing it. I was like, oh, come on, dude. But it's like, oh, no, that was all in his head. Okay. Proceeds to get in his car and drive. He had put it in his trunk. And I'm just skipping around here. I love the fact is he literally doesn't bury it until the end of the episode. So meaning he's been driving around all day, with them. Like, why'd you pick now to get rid of it? Maybe there's something deeper to that. I don't know. I'm assuming, because at first I was like, I'm wondering what attacked him. I'm assuming it's like, at the end of last episode, we saw the tiger. So I'm wondering if it's that. I mean, to be fair, it's a whole zoo of animals that got free that could have killed that cat. But I'm assuming, I just get the feeling like maybe the tiger, probably not, but regardless. So there's that whole situation. Obviously, Allegra's recovering from her concussion. Obviously, that's legitimately being a periodic issue throughout the episode for her. But the fact of the matter is she's trying to set stuff straight with Jacob, like kind of getting this deposition turned in and stuff like that. I also love that, like, basically it being a background thing, the Senator's commercial. I don't know why, because I like it just being like so cheap and just kind of like, oh, why do I have to curve it? Why can't I do it straight? And he's like, yeah, why can't be more politicians be straight? It's cheesy, but I love it because it seems like, legit political ad. But I thought that was, I don't know why, I just like it. Because I'm getting caught up in going on tangents and stuff like that. But what I liked is her first run-in with AD, and she's like, how did you know for me not to get in that car? It's like, well, AD's like, I didn't know, and this is something I brought up last episode too, and I was like, AD didn't know about the bomb. There's no way he knew about the bomb, not unless he did, but I'm thinking it's like, no, he just didn't want you in the car with Strucker, because I was like, he must have thought that you were going to get popped, which he kind of infers. He doesn't go as far as that, but he was like, yeah, I don't trust police. The only police he trusted was Felicity, and even she was telling him not to trust the police. And we're going to circle back to that later on in this, but the fact of the matter is, it's also interesting kind of learning a little bit more about AD later on too, that the fact of the matter is the only reason why he's back in town is because his grandma was sick, and so he moved back to town to kind of take care of her, like 2 years ago, but she died 3 months ago. And it's like, why would you come back to this town in particular, in general, just to look after her? And for him, it's like, because it's the person, you got to look after the person who knows you best. It's like, take care of that person that, I guess is kind of there for you. And I guess, it kind of got Allegra thinking, because I think for her, she probably never really thought about like who actually knows me better in this world. I mean, she ended up calling him Jake later on, but we'll kind of get to, like I said, I'm all over the place, so I do apologize. Since I'm on, because I brought up Strucker earlier, it's actually interesting. I was super surprised when they pointed out the fact that he was on. I was like, wait, what? Because it's like, oh, he's probably with his wife. At first I was like, oh, is Allegra going to interpret that as like, oh, his wife is dead too? And then it's like, oh no, Strucker, he's alive. I was like, wait, what? I was like, that's really interesting, which kind of along those lines, she got introduced to the chief, Eve, who talks about, it's so interesting when you hear all these different people talk about Felicity, because I mean, I'm sure it's got to hit Allegra in an interesting way, because for Allegra, she constantly reminded of how much she didn't know about her sister. But so many people are like, oh my god, your sister's so amazing. Eve's like, come over here, give me a hug and everything, but don't worry, we're not going to stop until we find the person responsible for this. Like, I just thought that was such an interesting, like, I mean, I guess it makes sense, but it's just so interesting that they had, especially Eve has this very like family. It's like, oh, you're part of the fam. It's like, oh, you're the sister and everything. I mean, it's so interesting too how that's how literally everyone in town refers to her. It's like, oh my god, you're the sister. It's like, why? I mean, I guess Felicity never really talked about. I guess Felicity never told much to Allegra, but maybe not too much about the rest of her life to anyone else. It's kind of interesting. Well, because Allegra had to identify the body, and the coroner was kind of like, oh yeah, like it's not like on, body bag like in, cop shows and stuff like that. And she's like, I already know, because there's stuff that came up in the first episode that kind of hits to like, oh yeah, their parents being dead, so it probably was a situation of having to identify their bodies. So this isn't like her first, Allegra's first rodeo with this whole situation. Another element to this whole situation I found really interesting is like obviously Freddy's kind of asking questions because it's like, yeah, I'm kind of the newspaper dude. So, but I thought what's interesting was because obviously he's insinuating because it's like, oh, it's interesting that obviously what happened to your sister, but also you just happened to not get in a car and then Strucker blows up. But you kind of walk away. That's interesting. But then Freddy proceeds to bring up all this stuff that Allegra's in town for. It's like, oh yeah, stuff about Jake and Brattle, and I'm like, how the hell does he know what he knows? I'm skipping around here, but the fact of the matter is, I think it's because Eve is his inside source. Because Eve makes such a point of like having that back and forth between her and Freddy about like, oh, get out of here, ha ha ha. Like her and the other cops are joking about it. But literally at the end of the episode, Freddy's sitting at the bar and she had sent over a drink and kind of gives him the nod. So it's like, okay, so I guess whatever's going on in town, maybe Freddy's kind of connected to it with Eve, or the fact of the matter is maybe Eve is Freddy's inside source of like how he knows what's going on in town. She always kind of gives him the lowdown, or maybe it's kind of like she kind of positions him to run certain pieces that she needs him to run type of situation. I just think, I mean, maybe it's just that Freddy's good at his job, but I just think it's interesting that he was able to dig up stuff about like all that Allegra's up to. So that's why I'm thinking like Eve must have done that for him, because it's like no one else in town knows why Allegra's there except for well, obviously the senator and Jake, but I don't see Jake running his mouth off about that, so that's why I'm just kind of like, either Freddy's just really good at what he does, or someone is feeding him that information. And like I said, I just get the feeling like it's Eve. For what purposes? I don't know. Like maybe that's just the type of relationship they have before, but it's just like that little nod off at the end, especially because she was alone. So whatever it is, whatever dealing she has with Freddy, she doesn't let, because she make that whole thing of like, oh, you're such a bottom feeder. You're literally the what was it like? You're basically the bug that feeds on the things that feed on corpses type of situation. Like you are literally the bottom of the barrel when it comes to like creatures type of situation. But it's like, then she's alone with him, kind of giving a nod like what that is. Like I said, we'll kind of have to, wait to kind of like dive more into that. What I also think is kind of another interesting situation is like obviously the whole Cyrus and the senator situation, because once again it's like they're basically telling Allegra to get her shit together because she's been off kilter. It's like, oh, I guess being back home has kind of made you off. It's like, yes, she's here for her family situation. She literally told you this last episode, but you're like, oh, we could use this as an opportunity for you to meet up with Jake and everything. I'm like, that's so shitty. It's like, but I guess it's because Allegra's always been, a very professional at her job. And it's like, usually I guess she's very stone and kind of buries stuff and keeps like everything calm and collected. And so now she seems like she's off kilter, to be fair. She's dealing with her sister. She's dealing with everything between you and the whole Brattle situation with the senator. And then also she's got a concussion. Like that's a lot to kind of go on, at the same time. So I think, you could cut her a little slack with everything that she's going through at the time. But I don't know. I just thought that was just kind of, but I guess also that kind of shows you kind of how cutthroat this whole situation is. But also the fact is, like I said, maybe that's just how she's operated in the past, but it's just kind of like, I don't know. Her and the senator obviously have their thing, but it's kind of like, obviously the senator's not letting that get in the way of kind of like, what he's aiming for, so, we'll see. Because I thought it was interesting, because obviously Allegra literally at I think earlier in the episode, she ends up getting a message talking about the fact is that all eyes that were on Brattle have disappeared. Well, he's disappeared, so they really don't know where he is right now. And obviously, Allegra's meant to be getting more information out of Jake. And that's kind of an interesting thing. Kind of like we get a little more insight into their background, because it's like, oh yeah, like, oh, those ice cream, not those icy cones and stuff like that. It's like, oh yeah, do you remember how much money we would have saved about, like, look at you just throwing these out here waiting for me. But the fact of the matter is, when we were younger, like how much we struggled just to get enough money to buy one of those. He's like, yeah, but he's rich enough that he basically bought the place, type of situation. So, but for him, it's like, he's rich now, and he kind of gets to, savor and enjoy that aspect of it. But I also thought it was kind of interesting, because as him and Allegra are walking, like, obviously his dude in the car is just like slowly driving by, and I'm noticing, I'm like, there's a couple people just, I didn't really think too much of it, but the streets are empty, but obviously there are a whole bunch of closed down businesses, and then like people just nearby. And there's the whole conversation of obviously Allegra is like, you need to give me more in this deposition. There's not really much to it. It's super light. But the fact of the matter is Jake doesn't want to give out anything until he knows about Brattle's position, because it's like, why would I tell you about the guy that I want you to get rid of? Because the fact of the matter is he hasn't been taken care of. He hasn't been arrested yet. So, but it's like, obviously you're scared. You're buying time. You know, and he's trying to be like, oh, no, I'm not. He walks out in the middle of the street. I'm like, I love that you walk out in the middle of an empty street. And even, you know, Allegra pointing out like, yeah, there's been 4 people kind of walking with us, keeping an eye out with guns and stuff like that. That's why I'm kind of like, you're literally walking in the middle of a street surrounded by your own guard. So obviously you are worried about Brattle coming after you, which we kind of get more context to that later on. I'm trying to understand obviously it seems like what Jake wants is money, power, and position. Like, the fact of the matter is Brattle threatens that. And it seems like because later on, because Cyrus was saying like, don't tell Jake about the fact is that Brattle is that we've lost sight of him, because if you tell Jake that, they're probably worried that like he won't spill the beans like he wants to, because it's like, oh no, that means he's coming and gunning for me. Why should I say anything when you guys aren't looking out for my best interest and protecting me? So they need him to think like, be under the pretense of like, yeah, he's still fine. They've got him. They're ready to kind of pounce on him at any moment in time, even though, yeah, they've lost track of him. And obviously Brattle has done what he's done and has left bodies in his wake type of situation. But, you know, Allegra, because her and Jake have a past, she, you know, was like, hey, all right, here's what it is. They've lost sight of Brattle. He might be on his way here. But then, like, Jake is talking to someone and he's kind of smiling. He's like, it's all going, basically, like, it's going according to plan. So it seems like he's manipulating Allegra, because I think the whole point is like he knows he can take advantage of Allegra in the senator situation to get Brattle out of the way. So it's like getting rid of like the competition so he can swoop in and kind of take over things and just kind of, you know, because for him, he enjoys being rich and being powerful, you know, that I'm thinking that's what it's a power play, not unless there's something else he's trying to accomplish through all of this. But that's why I'm like, you know, it's like, oh, it's all going according to plan. It seems like he's been slowly but surely like pulling Allegra on, I guess, kind of like, you know, now that she's back home, she's kind of not in the best state of mind just because of the whole Felicity situation. But I think it's because of all that he knows what strings he can pull to get her to do what he needs her to, which means in turns pulling her strings, because he knows like Cyrus and the senator have their own plans for him. But it's at least with this situation, he's like, oh, I've got an insider. So if anything ever goes down with Brattle, like, she's going to be looking after my best interests, you know, because she even says to him at the end, like, don't be the dead girl, you know, type of situation. So, you know, we'll see on that front. But I just thought that was interesting. Like I said, I don't know exactly what it is that he wants. Thought you'd be a little more bummed knowing that Brattle's coming after you, but maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something to that. Maybe he's going to try and use his information to bargain and like, you know, like I said, it seems more so like he's trying to be on good terms with them, because I'm about to say, not unless he's going to double cross them and like double back and kind of like, because, you know, Jake seems like the type who would like play both sides of the fence. So I'm wondering if he's going to try and like use this situation to kind of broker some stuff with Brattle. Maybe not. Like I said, it's probably more so a one-way thing of like, hey, I mean, to be fair, they already had a relationship, hence why they're using Jake to take down Brattle in the first place, but still. I also love that scene with Cindy kind of playing out the way it is, because even I was like, she's outside and she's like sliding the ice all over her body. I'm like, who are you doing that for? Like, are you doing that for the cops? She never actually explained why. She was just kind of like, basically like the AC was out and she was just trying to stay cool, but I'm like, I guess, well, I mean, because later on we see she's doing cam girl stuff, so I'm like, oh, so is that you just practicing? Is that just kind of like your maybe that was kind of practice of just kind of like, all right, I'm putting on a show, or maybe that's supposed to be kind of a free sample, like, yo, boys, look at me. Later on, I'm gonna put it on a show. Make sure you check it out. Like I said, I'm making huge assumptions here, but it just that's my brain correlating that. But it was interesting because obviously, you know, Allegra ends up learning from Cindy that her sister had a boyfriend, Floyd, and so that was interesting. I also thought it was kind of interesting, like she went in there and she talked about the fact is like, oh, both of you are so beautiful, but you got your own different vibes, and then she comes out topless, and Allegra's like, are you trying to like get at me or something? And she's like, yeah. And it's like, oh, and she's like, did you try it on my sister? She's like, yeah, one time. And it's like, you know, how did it go? It's like basically the same. So I was like, huh, that's interesting. I wonder why. Well, to be fair, we know like Felicity was kind of like the landlord and everything. Like, once again, I still don't I guess maybe that's her. Maybe she doubled up as kind of a landlord, and maybe the property she bought ended up making her landlord for them. So, or maybe, like I said, maybe it's something with her being a cop, but it's like they specifically referring to her as a landlady. So I'm like, that seems like maybe it's just because she has that property over there. It kind of inadvertently makes her the landlady. So like, that's what that's all about. But maybe it's just because she was trying to flirt with her to kind of get her to kind of back off about the whole rent situation. To be fair, Allegra's like, yeah, we've been through a lot, so it's like you can just ignore like this month's rent and stuff like that. So I don't know. I just thought that was kind of like an interesting seduction thing. And I'm like, is that supposed to be something more than what it was, or just is that her just kind of paying it forward, or is that her just legitimately being interested in Allegra? And it's like, oh, la-di-da-da, like, what do you think? But maybe there'll be more to it, maybe not. I also love that scene where she ran into that classmate of hers. It's like, oh yeah, I'm Barb. Remember, it's me, Barbara, and just the cadence. I can't mimic it because I can't really think of her voice right now, but just the way Barbara talked, and just like, oh yeah, this is I'm blanking on home dude's name. It's like, oh, like, you need to be careful because you might catch this. And then Allegra's like, wait, what's that? She's like, oh yeah, like a whole bunch of like women got it. A lot of people got it. I mean, except from my new. It's like, oh yeah, I got divorced. Did you know about me being divorced? It's like, no, yeah, I got divorced and stuff like that. It's like, and she also brings up like the high school reunion or whatever. It's like their 20th or whatnot. And I'm like, okay, since we're referencing that, it's going to play up in some shape or form. I'd assume like Jake would end up going, and as well as other people. Like, we haven't met too many classmates of her. That's the only one we're aware of. But, we'll kind of maybe flush that out a little bit more. But since they brought that up, I guess it's going to be later on in like the show when that ends up coming up, whatever that ends up being. But absolutely at the same time, Allegra's also dealing with the fact that she starts noticing like that truck's following her. Like, first she notices it when she was at Cindy's place. Well, what's the home dude's name? Was it Howard? But Cindy stays there too. So the truck goes by, and it's like, all right, she's with Jake and she's leaving. It goes by. So she stops by, a place to get some tools or whatever, and she's taking it. I wonder, is that dude the only taxi dude in the place? Because it's just like, I just think it's a small town too. What I'm assuming is a small town, but it's like, just for you to get the same taxi driver made me go, I just thought that was interesting. But there's probably a point to that. Like, he probably is like one of the few. But get stuck in traffic, ends up like drilling into the tire because it is Floyd's, and Floyd is like, he's basically been following her because in his own way he's like, oh, I'm trying to prove that I'm innocent. And she's like, not really the best way to prove that you're innocent when you're just basically kind of stalking me. But for him, he lays it out that basically he knows that because he's the boyfriend, he's gonna look bad. It's gonna be a situation of it's actually kind of interesting. Like, I didn't talk about it, but like I'm gonna do apologize. I'm all over the place, but Gene had talked about his story of like, oh yeah, he was kind of like Floyd was kind of a big time like football player, kind of like a star and everything, and then like his first big major game, he got one play before his knee went snap, crackle, pop. Actually, the title of the episode, interestingly enough. So I just hear it, and just don't that phrase it specifically, snap, crackle, and pop, made me go like, I was like, that's also, skipping ahead a little bit, but like, he can still run like crazy even with the messed up knee, because Allegra was like trucking along, but I was like, there's quite a bit of distance between you two. I mean, it actually took a couple of seconds for him to actually come back into frame when like she kind of, I mean, to be fair, she's suffering from a concussion, so she couldn't go all out and everything. Nevertheless, Floyd kept bringing up the point, like, he knew that everything was going to point to him being the suspect, and the fact of the matter is, it's like, first they're going to like find wiring and all this in my place, and then there's going to be kind of like a hunt for me and stuff like that. You just wait. And lo and behold, Eve brings that up later on of like, oh yeah, he totally was 100% the suspect. Oh, this is almost over. So it's like, okay, because even he was like, it's, it isn't just murder or something. Like, Floyd was basically saying that Felicity has stumbled across something so much bigger that they're all a part of it. He never went into specifics, but I'm assuming he was referencing the cops. And just because of, even Allegra catching on to like, oh, you're literally saying all the stuff that Floyd said you were going to say. So it's like, okay, so why? What are you covering up? Why are you trying? What is it? Just dirty cop stuff, which makes you wonder, is any shape or form is this connected to the Brattle stuff, the whole thing that Felicity might have, stumbled across that potentially got her killed, but then also why Strucker too. Because that would mean that Strucker isn't a bad guy, which I didn't even talk about that either. It's such an interesting element. Literally every cop checking underneath, bomb squads checking underneath every police officer's car. I mean, it makes sense in the grand scheme of things because literally the 2 targets have been cops. But that kind of shows that Strucker isn't a bad guy, is he? Because if his car blew up, but still, it's just kind of, I don't know. I mean, he was willing to tell Allegra, yeah, this isn't actually Felicity's place. I'm going to take you to her real place. So it's so what was the purposes of, that place, like I said earlier, I skipped over it, but Jean brings up the fact is that place that wasn't really that Allegra said wasn't really Felicity's, is technically their place. It's their getaway place, because apparently the place is in his name, but he's giving it to Allegra because it's kind of no point to it now. It's he wanted to also make sure it's oh no, I don't want you to think your sister was a homewrecker or anything. The fact of the matter is our marriage was already on the rocks before then, because it's oh, I married a bitch, and it's Felicity, Allegra was kind of yeah, it happens. But it was just an interesting situation, but AD does confirm it later on that it is in fact Eugene whose name is on the place, because she kept wondering how could she afford it. Obviously it's kind of sad that Allegra would even begin to suspect that her sister's kind of a dirty cop, when in actuality it seems like her sister was kind of a legit cop who stumbled across something she shouldn't have. Like I said, it's that murder mystery situation, just you have so many suspects because so many people are keeping secrets, and it's what secrets are you keeping and why? Seems like the only person she can really turn to now is AD, even hiring him as her attorney, retaining him, so one of the few people she feels like she can probably, count on in the town, because everyone else is potentially a suspect, so. What I also thought was interesting too was that moment she got off the elevator at first, and then there was that dark hallway and they had all those balloons. I'm like, what the fuck? What is that about? Okay, she's back on the elevator, just kind of gets off on her floor, and I was just okay, that's interesting. And obviously at the end, she kind of gets choked out, and that deposition that Jake had written gets taken. So I'm assuming that's Brattle being all right, so who's giving them information? Oh, it's Jake. All right, let's go pay Jake a visit. So hopefully Jake doesn't end up dead next episode. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. Or maybe there's someone else at play here, potentially doing it. I don't think so, but, like I said, we'll see. But either way, I'm very interested to see where all this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.